Hi, I'm Neil Renison. I'm the creative director at Tin Man Games and Steel Sky Productions.
So you guys just did a game, Warhammer Underworlds online through Tin Man Games and Steel Sky Productions. So talk a little about your company. You have a history of making physical board games into digital board games.
Yeah, so Tin Man Games has been going over 10 years now. We started off when the iPhone first came out, and we were creating apps based on old sort of choose your own adventure books. There was a certain series called Fighting Fantasy, which were very popular, which were kind of like RPG choose your own adventure books with dice rolling and character creation. And we released a whole ton of those. I think we ended up doing about 20 or 30 of those. And we did some other game books as well, based on things like Judge Dredd, and a few other things like To Be or Not to Be, which was a Kickstarter by Ryan North, who does the dinosaur comics. You might know him. And then we took one of the early Fighting Fantasy books, which was the Warlock of Vital Mountain, and we turned that into like a digital board game. So it's like you choose your path through the dungeon, but the dungeon would fall in around you, and you would have little miniatures bouncing around that would be your character you took on your adventure with a character sheet and whatnot. And then we had some funding from Sony a few years later to create a virtual reality Dungeons and Dragons type board game for PlayStation VR, which was really exciting. And that's called Table of Tales: The Crooked Crown. And we released that last year. And that was lots of fun to make. We spent a couple of years working on that, which was really amazing. It's about the table that comes to life. You put on your VR helmet, table comes to life, and you're moving miniatures and playing cards and rolling dice on a digital VR sort of like D&D game, which obviously leads as a nice segue to Warhammer Underworlds Online, which is also a card and dice and miniatures multiplayer board game by Games Workshop. So we ended up getting the license for that a couple of years ago, and started working on that. And it was released just a few weeks ago. So yeah, super excited.
So when you were obtaining that IP or that game, did you come to Games Workshop or did they approach you?
So it was an interesting one. So we've actually worked with Games Workshop before. So the sort of choose your own adventure game book apps that we were creating a number of years ago, Games Workshop actually released a few of their own through their publishing arm, which is called Black Library. And we did a Warhammer 40,000 kind of RPG gamebook app called Legacy of Dawn, Herald of Oblivion. These things always have really long, convoluted names. So we did that, and that was kind of relatively successful for us. But more importantly, it established us as that communication channel between us and Games Workshop. And I was always keen to work with them again on finding something that could work for us as a studio. And once we'd got working on Table of Tales, as I kind of alluded to, it's dice, it's cards, there's miniatures on a board, and we saw Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire had come out. It was a natural fit, and so conversation was started, and it moved on from there.
Yeah, that game kind of exploded out of the water. Games Workshop has had a lot of specialist games, I guess is what they call them, and like some are like pretty niche, and some do pretty well. I mean, Space Hulk is fairly well known, but Shadespire came out and wasn't called Shadespire; it's called Warhammer Underworlds, but everyone called it Shadespire for months, and it kind of exploded. It had a lot of depth, a lot of interesting meta mechanics, very competitive, and it only had like a 15 to 20 minute playtime. It was very short, so people gravitated toward it really quickly.
Games, they don't do well, by accident. They do well because they're well designed and well thought through. And I mean, a lot of Games Workshop games have been successful, but that game in particular, it did kind of even transcend some of their other titles, I think, and it did really well from the outset. And there was a lot of people playing Shadespire. It became very popular. There's a lot of obviously appetite in the Games Workshop community for miniatures-based board games. But I think once you add in the kind of like the deck building element, which kind of evokes more it actually evokes more the video game sensibility. So you're getting people that are into Hearthstone and games like that. You know, and obviously Magic the Gathering's an obvious one. You know, you're kind of melding all these worlds together, and obviously it's, you know, they still had to design something pretty incredible, but I think the miniatures and the deck building out there element, you know, it appealed to quite a large audience of people, because it attracted the miniatures people, the card people, and it's actually a really good and well-designed game. So, you know, when these people started playing it and they started playing it competitively, they could see the limit, you know, the awesomeness of the potential of the game, I think, and that's why it did so well.
Now, as the creative director, where do you even start? Because I think there's a misconception about the board game's already done, the mechanics are there, it's really easy just to port it into the digital space, but that's a misconception, because it's a lot harder to do, because you're talking with another opponent, you can stop, you can be like, oh, how does this work? Check the rulebook. You don't want to do that in digital space. You want everything has to just work and go. So what are some of the biggest challenges for you in trying to take that physical board game space and translate it digitally?
There's a number of challenges. I think the first immediate challenge is the psychology of playing a board game. When you play a board game, you're probably going around your mate's house with the board game, or he's already got it, and you're taking over a couple of beers, and you're sitting there and you're catching up, you're talking about what's happened in your day, you know, at work, and you're rolling some dice and playing it, you know, and you're using it as a sociable aspect. It's more of it's a linking point between the two of you. Obviously, immediately when you go into a computer format, that's immediately removed. So that's a really important part of it. The other issue is, I mean, if you've ever played any board game, especially a game that's quite complex, such as Warhammer Underworlds, you will play a combination of cards, or you will do things, and then you'll suddenly go, oh no, but I haven't got that thing. I forgot that my character was inspired, so I get to roll an extra dice on that roll that I just rolled. Can I roll it again? And you're constantly having to, you're a rules lawyer, you're becoming the referee of your own game all the time, and you have to keep track of all these little nuances and different rules. And if you forget one of those rules, or if your friend that you're playing with, it doesn't matter, you kind of just go with the flow, and you kind of, you know, you're having fun, you go, oh, have another beer, you know, it's no biggie. In a video game, however, the computer is doing the refereeing, and the computer is the all-knowing eye. It knows all the rules, and it knows all the nuances of how everything plays together. So there's never any room for error. The problem with that, of course, is as a programmer of the game, you have to program all those combinations of events to make sure that the computer referee is fair 100% of the time. And unfortunately, with a game like Warhammer Underworlds, if anybody's played it, you'll know that there are cards that get played and things can get stacked. You have a thing called the power step, where after you've made your go, the two opponents can play cards against each other, and those things stack up. So you might play a card, and another card might influence that card, and then your opponent plays a card that influences that card, and you end up with this system that can be quite complicated, where the outcomes get changed slightly depending on who played what, and that, oh boy, if you went into our bug list right now of things that the things that are a bit broken or not working in the game properly, most of them are those kinds of things where a card hasn't activated. Like we had one the other day where there's a card that you can play that when you drive back an opponent, they lose damage. And there's a couple of cards like that. And if those two cards are played simultaneously, in our game, they didn't activate for whatever reason. It was because a combination of events didn't happen. And so, they're the kinds of things that we have to kind of work through and get a feel for. It's very difficult.
So that leads me to my other question, where people, obviously you release a game, the first thing people do is, oh, where's this faction? I wanted this faction, or where's this card? Do they have this card? And you're like, well, that sounds like an extraordinary amount of work you have to do just to add maybe one or two cards that will change the game drastically. So you have to be very strategic in how you implement universal cards and new faction cards and make sure that they all work within the system. Otherwise you get that broken thing you were talking about.
Yeah, it's that decision making. So we, from the outset, made a very clear decision that we wanted to do things slightly different than the board game, and we want to release things at a different speed. And a lot of that is because, you know, there's a bit of hindsight. You know, we're building the video game 2 years after the board games come out. So, you know, there are things that have been learned from how the board game was released and some of the things with the cards. You know, even Games Workshop post regularly cards that are banned because they're a bit OP. You know, they're removed from competitive play. And so we've kind of kept track of those lists of cards and made decisions on whether to include them or not. And when it comes down to factions, you know, everybody has their favorite faction and warband that they want to see in the game. And, you know, we're a small studio. We have to, you know, making a load of 3D characters run around an environment, chopping each other to bits, you know, it's quite a lot of work. So we have to be very cautious about who we introduce and what and at what pace. So it's not only a design decision for us, it's also a kind of business financial decision too, and a marketing decision based on certain warbands are obviously very popular, i.e. the Skaven. You know, so we have to kind of like sort of make our decisions based on all those kind of factors.
And I can say from playing the game, I mean, I'm not a hardcore Spire player. I've played it a couple dozen times, like a couple years ago. But like the animations look for such a small studio, the animations look very nice and like fluidic, and each faction has their own like standing animation, and each faction has like the unique entrance and death animations. And so it was really kind of impressive for a small team to accomplish something like that, because I know a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much work goes into something like that. Yeah,
it's a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes, because you know, we put a lot of work in to make it look really, really professional, and you know, punch above our weight quite a lot of times, I'd say. But in that way, you're also saying, you know, you put yourself up on a pedestal, and people don't realize that it is a small studio that's made it. And that, you know, they're kind of comparing it against something that Blizzard's turned out in a weekend. So, but you know, you know, the game looks amazing. We're very conscious to try and make the look of the game as high quality as we can. We really want to evoke the theme of Warhammer Underworlds and get the kind of, you know. And, you know, we want people to identify with the characters as well. Each one of those characters in the warband has a personality and you know, and certain abilities and certain cool moves that they can pull off and stuff. So we want to kind of incorporate as much of that as possible.
You've also came out and told people that you will eventually, or want to eventually, work in DLC of different warbands for future expanding of the game.
Yeah, sure. We're actually working currently on bunch of those warbands now. That's the key thing. In fact, my job at the moment is translating. So I've been delegated the very fun job of doing localizations for all the cards. So yesterday I spent a number of hours doing the Russian, French, and Italian versions of some new warband cards, which we're going to be introducing. And we've got loads of the team are doing lots of things at the minute. We've got, you know, new animations going in, new 3D models going in. We've got new cards going in. So yeah, so we've got a bit of a plan of action. One of the things that's worth highlighting is that we're actually releasing the universal cards in our game for free. So anybody watching, if you had played the physical game, the only way the faction specific cards and the universal cards all came in the warbands that you would buy as boxes. We've actually separated those two out, and so there'll just be an ongoing sort of drip feed of universal cards, and we've actually got a whole load of new universals going in soon, in the next few days maybe. Watch this space. And then we're going to have some DLC dropping very soon too. I can't really say when, but not very far away. I would say in a few weeks, which will be a couple of new warbands, which is very exciting. So yeah, we're changing the meta up slightly, which is going to be fun.
Neil, do you have a favorite faction, favorite warband in the game, and why?
Yeah, I love the dwarfs. The Fire Slayers, they're my favorite, and they're not actually in the game at the moment. But Yeah, I was downvoted on that one, sadly. We obviously take quite a few votes on which ones we want to go in, and I was okay. No, they're not going in yet. So
I thought it was really smart to actually leave, I think they're called the Blood Reavers out, because they're known as like the worst starter faction in the whole game.
yeah,
So you guys
Garrett,
actually had a different Chaos faction warband instead of them in the game.
yeah, that was an interesting decision actually, and we made that decision a very long time ago, so my memory is a little hazy. But a lot of that was down to, or some of the reasons I chose anyway, was a marketing reason, because Magore's Fiends, they just look cool. They have a big dog, you know, Riptooth, and we felt, you know, from a video game point of view, we needed, you know, it would be really good to have, you know, some really cool characters on marketing material, and you know, and Garrick's Reavers are a great warband actually. There's a lot of people that have actually gone back to them. I've heard after, you know, quite a while, and got quite a lot of pleasure out of playing them. So, so you never know, they might make an appearance at some point.
Can you talk about your relationship with GW and how you work with them to create these warbands, and specifically because some of these models have never been animated before, like in any fashion. There's been art, there's been work, there, you know, you have that stuff, but nothing's ever been fully animated, moving, attacking, breathing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, Games Workshop are great to work with. You know, we're working with their license, so obviously we have to work within, you know, a set of guidelines and boundaries of what we can and can't do with their world and their characters. I think the small bonus is we are making almost like a one-to-one of the board game, so there's not really much we can do to deviate too much from their original sort of designs. But yeah, I mean, it's a straightforward, you know, anybody that works with a licensed product, there is a level of approval that needs to go through. So at all stages of everything we do, we have to get things approved, and you know, and it brings up discussions. Sometimes we want to do something that might be feel a little bit different than what they were trying to achieve with the board game, and so obviously we need to have discussions about that and come to sort of decisions. And the great thing is it's all about trust, right? Like they know that we love the property. They know that everybody that's working in our studio, we all play the board game all the time. We all have our favorite warband. We understand, we care, and so every decision that we make is based on that, really, you know. And so when we go to ask them something, they know we're not just coming to ask them because we think it looks cool. It's you know, there's a lot of thought that's been gone into, like, we should do something this way, you know, and things like that. So yeah, it's usually pretty great. Yeah, it's all good.
One of the things I have to talk to you about is when I was playing your game and reviewing it, I noticed that after I completed a casual match or a ranked match, I would get rewarded with, like, you know, a little vase, and it would give me, like, you know, deck titles or cosmetics.
Yeah.
And I was really fascinated because I was earning those after every match with that particular warband I was using. Because we live in a world where basically I would have seen that as a loot box microtransaction fest, but it wasn't. And I just say, just as from a gamer and journalist, I thought that was incredible that wasn't included in your game. I'm like, this is so rare. You don't see these in games anymore. Usually there's some kind of weird 99 cents for in-game currency to buy booster packs, but not in yours. Like, you play a faction, you get a reward specifically for that faction. The more you play, the more rewards you get for that faction.
Yeah, it's funny. It's quite old-fashioned, really. I mean, that's how I used to play video games. You know, I think from the outset of when we were designing this game, we were very conscious that we were doing almost a one-to-one of the board game. The board game is, you go out and you buy a base game which has 2 warbands in it. You then, if you like the game and you see a warband you like, you go and purchase a warband and you get more cards. You go, you know, and you just keep. That's how you build. That's how you play the physical game. And we could have quite easily just gone, hey, let's make a free-to-play version, and there's, like, you do microtransactions and loot boxes, and it's all this kind of stuff. And we felt that wasn't in the spirit of the game. That's not how the game works. That's not how people, you know, the community that are already love the board game see the board game. And I think we were very keen to kind of keep as one-to-one as that as possible. And the only difference, obviously, that we made was that we actually removed universal cards from the warbands, and we've made those free. And that was important because for a video game, you still do need that desire to come back. So what happens in a free-to-play game with microtransactions, if you're playing on your phone, for example, you get pinged. It's like, hey, there's a new thing, come back, spend some money, you know. And we can't do that. So by dropping free universal cards every few weeks, every few months, however we end up doing it, it will hopefully get people to come back and go, that card looks cool, I'm going to add that to my deck. And they'll go in, play a few more games, and then it's like, oh, hey, look, there's some new warbands, I might check those out. So it's all about, you know, it's all about, it's kind of like we just wanted to make decisions on the design of the game that were kind of based on good morals, I guess, you know, and not trying to sort of catch anybody out with any super hidden things that they have to pay money for. But secondly, you know, we wanted to keep the essence of the game is very much about choose your warband, build your deck, play a game with your friends, you know, and we didn't want to block anybody from having that experience at all.
Now, when you were in the early stages of this, did you consider, obviously because you're a small team, did you consider releasing this on mobile as well, or did this start out as a mobile game that transcended to a PC game? Talk about that process.
No, it's PC. It was definitely PC from the outset. That was 100%. Obviously, we've been going on this for a couple of years, so there's been lots of talk about different platforms, about going to mobile and various things, and you know that's all still on the cards. But what I can say at the minute is we're concentrating on the PC version. It's important that we build the community, that we get some good content out there, that we get a nice stable game that's competitive and fun to play, and then we'll probably look at potential platform expansion in the future.
Awesome. And then can you give us, you already said universal cards are coming out soon, so be on lookout for those. Can you give us like a tease of like what warband we might be able to see coming up next?
So we've got 2 warbands coming. They're not what people think they are, ish, maybe. I mean, some people might guess, but we're doing things a little differently, as I've said. But we'll be announcing those actually very soon, and they'll be available in the game. The team are working super hard to get them ready. Yeah, and I'm obviously doing the Russian translations, which is fun.
Do you speak Russian?
No.
Logical. Have the creative director translate all the cards.
No, so we have access to, because obviously the game is being translated physically into different languages. So we have access to some of those localizations, but we also use our own localization partners, and we also actually call on the community. We have a really good Discord community, and there's been more than a couple of times where I've sent a message out going, "Can somebody check this quickly?" You know, and there's 2 or 3 people in the community that are fluent in various languages that will pop back and go, that's great. You could, if you change it to this word, it would sound even more kind of Warhammery, you know, that kind of thing. So that's been really great.
And then just as for a fun question, because I'm just genuinely curious, a lot of Games Workshop, their files are sculpted in like, you know, ZBrush and then put into a CAD program and printed. Can your studio use those files and like, you know, animate them or like use them as like a base plate to start building the models, or is it just built from scratch and you only use them for reference?
We do everything our own from scratch. Yeah.
So it's a lot more work than people think it is.
It is a lot of work, yeah. No, we build everything. We've got some really talented artists that we work with. We've got some great sculptors in the office.
There's awesome, guys. So the game is out now on Steam. People should buy it because it's incredible. I'm telling you, like, it's been a long time. Breath of the Wild was the last game I played where it was like 9:30 at night, and I'm like, I'll play a few games, and then my wife calls me on my phone. She's like, "Are you coming to bed?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be up in half an hour." She's like, "It's 2:00," and I'm like, "Holy crap!" Like, I just spent 5 hours playing this game. It did not feel like 5 hours, and that's a great feeling in a game where you just lose track of time because it's so addictive.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. Yeah, it's a great. Honestly, it's a great game. We have Friday afternoon drinks, and one of my colleagues was playing online and sharing his screen through Discord, and he had this epic 15-all game going on Friday, and it's moments like that where I just go, this thing we've made is just, it's so good, you know. And it was, yeah, really, really great game. I'm so proud of it. I'm proud of the team. They've done a really great job. Really great job.
So where can they go to find more information about Warhammer Underworlds online?
Yeah, so you can head over to Steam, which can do Warhammer Underworlds online. We also have Warhammer Underworlds-online.com as well that you can go to. We have a really great Discord community. Lots of people on there that love the game, that talk about the game, that are willing to help if you're stuck, if you're not understanding the rules, and you can jump on there. We have the usual Twitter, which is @WooOGame. We have a Facebook group as well.